I'm probably good to just jump into the Krystal Kyle debate if that sounds good to you. I feel like this is a pretty, topical debate going on. And it's one that we've discussed a little bit, pushing back on claims from fools like Aaron Mate that Trump didn't commit a crime. Of course not. Everything he did falls under free speech. And to criminalize his attempt to overthrow the American government would somehow be setting a precedent that would criminalize our free speech too. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. You literally have to be brain dead to come to that conclusion, in my opinion. When Donald Trump is the world's most blatant criminal of all time. But anyway, a lot of people have had this take, weirdly defending Donald Trump and trying to act like the case against him is somehow a violation of our free speech rights, which makes no sense at all. I promise. Oh, you're good.
No, I was just going to add that it would almost be as if committing crimes with your speech hadn't been well documented, and you wouldn't have countless people. Like, it's crazy. Like, that's like saying, oh, slander can't be a crime. That's just speech. Like, but no. And particularly when you take a guy like Donald Trump, who was never shy about taking the press to court whenever they said anything that he didn't like about them. So again, he challenged their free speech in that instance. Also, when the mob orders hit, like if I tell Gavin to go kill somebody and he does it, I'm not able to be like, what? That was just my speech, man. That was just my speech. Otherwise, Charles Manson wouldn't have died in fucking prison. You know what I mean? So a couple of examples right off the top of your head will easily shred the idea that, oh, just because he said these things, I mean, that's protected by the First Amendment. It's like, no, it's not. The First Amendment doesn't protect your right to organize crime with your speech.
Here we go with this January 6th case, which is also under the auspices of Jack Smith, who's similarly in charge of the Espionage Act case. And he decided to resurrect the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which doesn't alone make the bringing of the charges unwarranted. I mean, an old statute can still be a relevant statute. But the issue here with this particular charge, conspiracy against rights, is that it's a wholly novel application of this statute specifically tailored to criminalize Trump's conduct. So a hallmark of criminal law, or at least the rational application of criminal law, you would think, is that a violation of a law is foreseeable to a reasonable person, meaning a reasonable person should be able to know or readily intuit or predict that their conduct would be in violation of the law. And that requires that a law not be subject to these creative extrapolations to encompass a vast array of conduct that wouldn't have been initially contemplated as criminalizable under the statute. Okay? I spoke to one of the defense counsels who's representing a co-conspirator in this indictment, John Eastman, who came up with the cockamamie theory about Pence having the authority to discard electoral votes or count rival slates of electoral votes that have been submitted by Trump electors in the 6 supposedly contested states. And his view is that at 81 years old, this guy is the founder of FIRE, the civil liberties organization, longtime defense attorney who's represented anti-war activists, minority activists over the years. He views this as one of the most ominous infringements on the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights writ large that he's really ever been involved with in his career. Because what are they doing? They're taking what had been previously understood to be political activity and political speech, which you may disagree with, and you may vigorously want to dispute. At the time, I was very much in opposition to a lot of these theories around election fraud that were being propagated by the Trump campaign and right-wing media. And I was, furiously debating with people who were trying to claim that there was some inherent authority of the vice president to unilaterally exercise his own discretion to decide which electoral votes to count. Okay, so I was against that theory on a political level. But the problem here is now that they've transferred it into the domain of criminal law, which is a fairly stark Rubicon crossing thing to do, because now you're probably going to see, this seems to be ushering in, or could it have the potential to usher in, a new era where rival political factions are now going to be much more incentivized to wield the apparatus of punitive.
Bro, once again, Donald Trump opened that door. Donald Trump ran on criminalizing Hillary Clinton. Lock her up. Lock her up. Don't act like, oh, now because we're actually going after a crime that has been provably committed over and over again, now somehow we're opening the door. Of course not. Of course not. That's so ridiculous. And again, Donald Trump and his supporters clearly had no problem with setting the precedent of going after your political opponents. By the way, Hillary Clinton, I also would have been happy if she had been found guilty. Wouldn't have had a problem with it. Wouldn't have been complaining about her free speech rights. That's for sure.
Obviously not, dude. And that's what the whole deal is, right? Like you and I would be here like cheerleading to all fuck if Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, or if in 5 years from now they decide they want to put it on Joe Biden or whatever. Like, of course, I'll be celebrating. I'll say these crimes deserve to be punished. Thank God we are finally now enforcing, some sort of actual. I don't know what they'll do to Donald Trump, so I don't want to like put the cart before the horse. Who knows? I don't think anybody really knows exactly what they'll do to Donald Trump, but at least there's going to be some sort of consequence, right, for the fact that he did brazen crimes in public, you know.
Right.
So.
And if they do take this precedent in the future, and a president, a couple years down the road says, hey, well, because of the fact that this precedent has been opened up, I'm going to try to go after one of my political opponents for a bogus reason. Well, if that time comes, then we'll call that out as a bogus reason and an invalid reason to go after your political opponent, and our analysis will change. But that just doesn't mean you can't just prosecute any crimes ever, because that could potentially, theoretically, open up the possibility for other people to then try to go after people under bogus charges. Like, that's not a reason not to prosecute a crime. And if that does happen in the future, then we'll call it out, obviously. But that doesn't mean we can just sweep all this under the rug.
Absolutely.
Punitive criminal law or punitive criminal state power to basically resolve their political disputes with other factions.
Okay. So can I interject here, and then you can respond? I want to respond to some of your things, and then you can respond to what I say. So let's start with the notion that this is like about free speech. If Donald Trump had just done 25, 50, 100 rallies downplaying the results of the election, saying he won even though he didn't, and all that stuff, and he never did the fake electors slates, he never did try to force the DOJ to send letters to the different states demanding that they don't certify Biden and do the alternate slate of electors. If he never took those other actions, do you think he would have been charged?
Impossible to say. All I can do is read what the indictment actually contains as allegations of what constitutes this supposed criminal conspiracy that Trump is guilty of conducting.
Yeah, because I don't think there's any way he would have been charged if it was just the rallies and he just.
What do you mean supposed criminal conspiracy that Donald Trump was involved with? There's nothing supposed about it. He was as brash and as, full of hubris as he could have possibly been. He was careless as all fuck. With regards to the law, he thought he was above it. He still believes that he's above it, right? He thought that becoming president was his ticket to solving all of his fucking, criminal issues, right? To have the upper hand on, whatever district attorney, now fucking attorney general, whomever else would try and put him in jail or at least fine him massively, for, robbing the IRS, for, doing shady dealings with the mob, for all of his, real estate and, non-payment of work that he had whenever, all kinds of, litany of crimes that he committed before. But for him to then stand there in broad daylight, like we've had a bunch of people in chat, call out like his, find me 11,000 votes, right? There are multiple like very criminal things, orders that he gave, as a still sitting president of the United States, right? This is before inauguration of Joe Biden. He is literally giving orders to undermine democracy, to undermine the Democratic electorate. And we have it on tape. In multiple instances. And this wasn't a one-off on January 6th. He continued to double, triple, and quadruple down over and over and over again. And he continued to surround himself with people who were continuing to, make this message. So there's no way to deny that it wasn't a criminal conspiracy, that there was no known intent, right? And for Michael Tracey to try and portray it like so aloofly, so like casually, right? As if it's like, oh, this is just what's being alleged. It's like, we all know that you're trying to, you know, simp for a team here. This is an objective analysis.
Michael sounds like Trump's lawyer right now.
Literally.
He's like, you're trying to imply that my client was involved in some covert criminal conspiracy. Yes, he obviously was. He obviously was. He literally still brags about it to this day. He refuses to admit that he lost the election. He continually talks about how the election was stolen. It's well documented that he engaged in a criminal conspiracy to try to steal an election, even after being told a million times by experts that the election was not won by him, that Joe Biden was the rightful victor, et cetera, et cetera. This is insanity.
Did his speech. I think once you got to the fake elector slates, that became the real criminal issue. And to respond to some of your other points there, you know, I know you brought up a free speech expert who says he's concerned by this, but there's also like free speech experts.
A defense counsel,
No, I understand that.
for one of the alleged co-conspirators.
No, I got you. But I'm saying there's also many free speech experts who think that Citizens United is about political speech, and I totally disagree with that. I think it's about political corruption. And there's also experts on the other side of this, like Bradley Moss. So it's not particularly persuasive to me. I find that just like an appeal to authority. To the idea that this is unprecedented and a novel application, I mean, I would argue almost anything we would do legally vis-a-vis what happened is going to be novel and unprecedented because we've never been here before. And the charge of conspiracy against rights, to me, I look at that and I say the reason why they did that charge is because it was an attempt to disenfranchise millions of voters if their scheme had succeeded.
Okay, so I'm not trying to appeal to authority. I'm just giving you an example of another person who's making an argument on the basis of free speech without being a Trump partisan. I mean, this guy happens to not even like Trump.
And we know you're not a Trump fan as well.
I understand the point. I'm just saying there's experts on the other side of this
on either side of this. So there are people with fancy pedigrees that would say all kinds of things. That doesn't necessarily make them correct.
No, I'm not saying his pedigree makes him correct. I was just citing another example of someone making a similar case. So you propose a hypothetical of, what if Trump had only done such and such and not this, what charges have been brought? I mean, that's impossible to say. It's a counterfactual. What we can do is look at the actual text of the indictment. And what it does is it posits that a litany of Trump's political speech is being characterized as constituent elements of this overarching felonious conspiracy. So there's a reason why they list a whole bunch of Trump's tweets where he's criticizing state legislators, or he's attacking the Secretary of State of Georgia, or he's making all kinds of other, again, I think mostly harebrained comments about the lack of veracity of the election results. There's a reason why all that is cited by Jack Smith in this indictment as a component of the overarching conspiracy, because that's what he's saying is a part of the conspiracy, the speech. Now, is it the only element of the alleged
oh my God!
No,
can we pause it one more time? I'm sorry,
but
this is intentionally obtuse here, and I just want everybody to understand. No, guys, listen. This guy, you can't put, Al Capone on trial, bro, because he didn't actually do anything, bro. He just had all of his homies do it. You can't put Charles Manson in jail. See, because here's what you fundamentally misunderstand. It's like, yes, were these people getting killed and robbed all around the Hollywood Hills in the late 60s? Of course, but you can't put Charles in jail. He's just telling everybody to do it. He's just brainwashing them, making them worship him, believe that he is a god and the only truth teller. Oh, and then now he's directing them to do crimes at his will. Oh, wait, we actually can put you in jail for that? Because that does sound a lot like what Donald Trump did, just minus the murdering.
Yup, 100%. Also, I'm so annoyed by this denseness on the part of people like Michael Tracey, where they love to talk about precedent. Oh, aren't you afraid about what kind of precedent this is going to set? Are you not at all afraid about setting the precedent that it's cool for a sitting president to try to steal an election and stay in power after losing? Like, is that not a precedent that concerns you whatsoever? Because personally, I remember that period of time when Trump was refusing to admit that he lost. And I'm not trying to be like fucking Rachel Maddow over here, but it was a little uncomfortable. It was a little bit weird. Everyone was like, hey, is this going to end? Are we going to have a peaceful transfer of power? What is this going to result in? Like, it was kind of scary. I'm not going to lie. And I would like to live in a country which, by the way, barely has a fucking semblance of democracy left in the first place. Yeah, I would appreciate if every 4 years, when the president loses an election, if there's a peaceful transfer of power and the entire country and the entire electorate isn't thrown into a state of fucking chaos because the president is lying and saying that he lost an election and fomenting his rabid fans to try to do a coup. Like, yeah, I would prefer to live in that America. I don't think that makes me a crazy, MSNBC addicted liberal to say that. And I think it just makes me a rational person to, yes, want there to be a precedent where the president cannot try to steal an election and illegally stay in power.
100%. We don't even let you get elected more than twice, which is actually, it shows the efficacy of the Republicans when they want to get something done. If FDR kept spanking them, and they knew it was going to happen if anybody else ever got in power and started doing some social democracy, and they were like, whoa, we've got to do something about this old boy from New York. You know what I mean? So, yeah. As far as the whole transition of power thing, I remember that day. Obviously, it wasn't that long ago, but I remember Gavin, I was like, oh, come on, bro. It's a bunch of fucking hillbillies, parading around the Capitol. Isn't it kind of funny? And you were like, bro, this is a serious fucking crime. And I was like, it is a serious crime, but it isn't. I remember that. So all I'm going to say is that you've been principled. Gavin's been consistent since day one.
The point is that you have to weave together this vast range of, this vast constellation of political conduct and put it under the umbrella of now a felony conspiracy.
So there's a few things there. I think the fact that you emphasize one component is, itself important because you acknowledge it's not the entirety of the indictment or what he's being charged for. I do think that, a person who allegedly committed crimes, talking about those alleged crimes is probably pretty relevant to, a jury in terms of figuring out whether or not they believe Trump is guilty on these. And I would also say, so in terms of my view, I think there are three pieces here that make the indictment, pretty solid and make it so that I support it. Because if we were in a situation where Trump had just given rallies and said all kinds of nonsense, I would not support that indictment against him. I would think that that was a violation of free speech rights. So to me, there are three key components that makes this legitimate. Number one is the fact that there was no significant amount of fraud. Number two is the fact that a reasonable person presented with all of the information that Trump was presented with would understand that there was no real fraud. And number three, that in spite of those things, you still concoct this elaborate multi-state scheme to try to, in effect, steal an election. So you said previously, that you didn't think any reasonable person would really.
That was Krystal saying, these are the three prongs of my pitchfork that I'm going to use to skewer your entire argument, and just laid it all out there. But really quickly, just for anybody who, maybe they have a flight to catch and they're not going to get the rest of this live stream, here are the three main takeaways for why this is actually a criminal issue and we're not just pearl clutching, my feelings because of Donald Trump, which also Krystal and Kyle have literally never done throughout their careers. One of my favorite things about Kyle is that some people who understand the gravity of the Trump situation, they can't also turn around and then just kind of laugh at some of the fucking insanely foolish and crazy shit that he said, where you're just like, whoa, this is funny, right? And I've always been that way. When George Bush is probably one of the most evil fucking criminal people that are still alive on this entire earth. But if you just take some of those dudes' pull quotes out of context, or even in context, dude, it's hilarious to just watch him up there being dumb as shit and be like, wow, that guy was fucking president just because his daddy said he was going to be. You know what I mean? He went all the way from the fucking Texas oil fortune to the White House. But anyway, long story short, to pretend that these guys are just caping for Donald Trump is crazy. And so for her to come out and be like, look, dude, even in spite of all the things that I, would not, personally hold Trump accountable for his brash speech for, this is a clear, bridge too far. And here are three fucking examples, and all you're gonna have is, well, my client's been alleged. Oh wait, not my client. I'm sorry. I'm just it literally it does. It sounds like he's just regurgitating the most diehard deranged Trump sycophants that already have to start at the conclusion that he's innocent and that this is somehow the deep state trying to control Donald Trump. Why would the deep state care if Donald Trump became president again, guys? He already gave a massive tax cut to the rich. He didn't do a goddamn thing to reel back the control of the military. He didn't free Assange. He put all kinds of different fuckers like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Jared Kushner. These are not doves, guys. These are hawkish individuals, each with their own agenda, each with their own Bolton had his fucking warpath against Iran. Kushner did whatever the Saudis wanted, and then Pompeo was, Israel's #1 stooge in the White House. You guys know what I'm saying? So, anyway, to act like this guy is some enemy of the deep state, and that's why they're throwing all of this as for the birds.
100%.
Expect that this was criminal behavior. They would think that this was just political behavior or political speech. I just really disagree with that. And in fact, you have people who were cajoled into being fake electors under false pretenses precisely because of the reason that they would understand that there was something wrong with what they were doing if they really understood what was going on. If I was personally, concocting this like elaborate multi-state scheme involving some cockamamie legal theory on January 6th to try to steal an election, I would 100% understand that there was potentially something criminal about that. And, people like Bill Barr and others also, viewed it as likely criminal activity. So I just also disagree with the idea that this is totally wild and no one would have seen this as a problem or criminal behavior before.
Well, Bill Barr, despite having fallen out with Trump, as you know, still has prefaced his comments on this January 6th indictment by saying that there's a potential danger in criminalizing political activity. But you're right, he nonetheless thinks that the charges could be seen as legitimate.
As legit.
So
yeah.
on the question of the lack of fraud or a reasonable person not being able to conclude that there was actually significant fraud in the election, that's a matter of political contestation, or had been. Like, you could make an argument that there is no fraud of any significant import, and I would probably make the same argument.
No. We have to pause this really quickly. We don't have to guess. We don't have to wager. We don't have to wonder, probably, hey, I'll give it to you. No, you don't. You literally have to give it to me because my argument is rooted in fact. Guess what? They found more votes for Joe Biden in Arizona. They found more votes for Joe. They went back. They did all of the double counting. They went back and did all the referendum. It's clear as day that that the voter fraud that they alleged that happened actually cost Joe Biden, or, not voter fraud technically. I'm not talking about like fake people going to vote, but just miscounting and misrunning the numbers was, it ended up they found more votes for Joe Biden. So clearly he misled the public about this. It's not up for discussion. It's not a matter of political framework.
Right. And if there had been like true examples of mass voter fraud and irregularities that you could actually point to and prove in a court of law, then I don't think many people would be making this argument. Like, if there was actually a good reason for Trump to think that the election was stolen, I really don't think a lot of people would be making this argument. The fact is, though, that he did pursue the case in, I think, 60 different courts and lost every single case. Like, it's an open and shut case, dude. There is no wiggle room for you to, construct this conspiracy from. It's just, an open and shut case, like I said.
And then the idea, at least prior to August of 2023, is that will be resolved in the realm of political disputation rather than by a prosecutor indicting your debate opponent
But again, he's not being indicted because he, lied about the fraud, or because he believed about him or didn't believe him or whatever. He's indicted because there was no real fraud. He was presented with all sorts of information to indicate that there was no real fraud. He gave some indications privately that he knew some of these claims were, quote, crazy, at least when it came to Sidney Powell, and yet went ahead with these fake slates of electors and trying to overturn the results anyway. So it's those three pieces that you need. And if you didn't have one of those pieces, then you're right. It becomes difficult. And listen, they're going to have to, at trial, they're going to have to prove what he heard and what he knew and what he really thought about these claims, et cetera, is going to be a component piece. But without all three of those pieces, then, I think that this would fall apart.
Can we pause it one more time?
If you don't have those three pieces, like.
That's a great point by Krystal about Sidney Powell, because one of the things that they are going to have to prove in court about this, and I think we've talked about it on the show, Gavin, is like, one of the things that makes this cut and dry is that there was clear criminal intent, right? Which is something that they will take into consideration at trial, right? It's kind of like we were talking about taxes the other day, and I read about it, right? A little bit afterward. I still don't know nearly enough to, know about the Cornel West tax situation. But the idea is that the people in our chat were right. It's like, hey, they'll give you a lot more leeway about not paying your taxes if you're honest on your taxes, and you'll just accrue more of a debt. But if you lie about your taxes and you get caught doing it, that's when they will try and put you in fucking jail. It's the same idea. It's the criminal intent behind it. It's not like, oh, I fucked up on my taxes and I didn't actually do the math right. It's like, look at me trying to do all of these loopholes to like avoid pay, And in the same instance with the election fraud, within the Sidney Powell, they're going to be able to document that he knew that his claims were fraud and that he was still misled his supporters in order to subvert democracy, which you could argue is treasonous, by the way. And everybody's acting like they're going for the most outlandish charge. No, the most outlandish charge would be trying this motherfucker for treason. And I think you'd have a fucking case for it, man. And do you know what we'd have to do to him if he fucking got found guilty of treason? You know what? It wouldn't be a picnic for him.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I mean, he literally committed or attempted to commit treason, sedition, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I was about to make a point, but I seem to have forgot. Oh yeah,
Michael Tracey's eyes for a second. You'll remember.
I was just going to say the Hillary case, because you were correctly pointing out the importance of proving intent. And obviously people like to point to the Hillary Clinton case. Well, why are they indicting Trump, but Hillary got off? Well, if you're upset about that, then you should be mad at Donald Trump for being the world's least sophisticated criminal in history. Because Hillary, despite how brazenly criminal her use of a private email server undeniably was, she was sophisticated enough to not admit to the criminality a million times in like leaked recordings and stuff, as Trump did. Like, as you mentioned, the Sidney Powell thing, there was also an instance where he told Mike Pence, "You're being too honest," after Mike Pence basically told him that he could not, in fact, prevent the election from being certified, and explained to Trump why that was not a possibility. Trump said to him, "Mike, you're being too honest." So once again, admitting that he's full of shit and that he knew Mike Pence was correct, but he was goading him into doing the wrong thing anyway. So yeah, Trump has made it more than provable that the intent was absolutely there, that he knew he was doing something wrong. And again, if you're upset about the fact that Hillary wasn't indicted, but Trump was, then just be mad at Donald Trump, because he made it really fucking easy for the feds to get him on this one, and for the fucking DOJ to, draw up a pretty easy case.
100%. And that's why you should also hate the Democrats, because they fucked off with all of the super easy, in public, tremendously transparent crimes that Donald Trump had spent his whole fucking life committing. And they were like, you know what? We have to go with one that's not gonna fucking, implicate us, where he can't turn around and do the exact same thing. So they went down the Russiagate rabbit hole, which was stupid. And it lets you know how many motherfuckers in the Democratic Party have violated the emoluments clause and, pocketed tremendously from their, time in office and made a fortune, just like Jared Kushner did. That dude made like hundreds, an insane fortune while Donald Trump was president. But anyway,
examples of resistance, liberal, whoever, saying the Electoral College should do whatever last time around. Sure, they were saying things that were kind of wild, but they didn't create some like fake elector scheme to also back it up with knowledge that what they were saying was completely false.
And I think Jack Smith thinks he can prove that Trump knew he was lying, because there's some indications of that in the indictment where, like you pointed out, Trump acknowledged to co-conspirator 3 that the rigged election claims were, quote, crazy. And then, of course, when he tried to get Mike Pence to overturn the results and Pence said no repeatedly, Trump said, quote, he said, quote, "You're too honest," to Mike Pence, implying he knows that this is like dishonest. He wants him to do something dishonest. And then to your other point, just the idea that like, how would a reasonable person act in this scenario? Well, he was told by the vice president, senior leaders of the Justice Department, the director of national intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, the senior White House attorneys, senior staffers on the defendant's 2024 reelection campaign, state legislators and officials, state and federal courts. You had all these people who were like, this is not true. This is not real. You can't go down this path. And then he did it anyway. I mean, honestly, I'm at the point where I don't even think you need to prove that he knew he was lying, because a jury might think a reasonable person given this information wouldn't have gone forward with the fake elector scheme, and that's the crime.
But then he could just say that, yeah, the officials in various security state agencies that had been at loggerheads with Trump for his entire tenure told him one thing, and he disagreed with it.
Bro, not just people that were against him told him that. His own vice president told him that. The dude that he selected to be to share the ticket with. Like, you can't just say, oh, a bunch of intelligence people that hate Trump were telling him that. No, his own people that he selected, people that he appointed, people that he trusted and thought were worthy of, giving him advice and being part of his administration. This is just dishonest. I'm literally starting to think these people are just fucking lying. Like, Michael Tracey is just fucking lying here to defend Trump for no reason, because that's just not true.
I know, it's mind-boggling. That's why I'm like, how do you take this in good faith? You are literally ignoring every piece of evidence that's been shoved in your face over the last 3 fucking years.
Oh my God.
And then,
but it wasn't just them. It wasn't just them,
else.
though.
Other state legislators told him something else. Various other consultants that he was, interfacing with at the time told him something else. John Eastman, who
he was fishing for that answer, Michael,
was actually a professor of constitutional law, told him something else.
He was fishing for that answer, though, right?
Who is telling him what now to determine whether he's actually guilty of committing a crime?
Wasn't he fishing for that answer? If 90% of the people are telling you this is not real, and these are accredited, highly respected people, and then 10% are saying, oh yeah, it's real. And by the way, those people like Sidney Powell, who's an absolute psychopath, he's clearly fishing for that answer, and he either knows this is bullshit or is willing to disregard the fact that it's likely bullshit to continue forward with the harebrained scheme. But I think the main point here is the reason why I don't think this is about political speech is because if he didn't do the fake elector scheme, they wouldn't have a case, but they did the scheme.
Okay, well, the elector scheme is pursuant to a theory that John Eastman in particular had propagated around the supposed primacy of state legislatures in making modifications to election law and designating the electors who are rightly representative of the state's election outcome. So when you say that there's no such thing as, there was no significant fraud, okay, but there are multiple components to this theory, which again, I don't agree with on the substance.
Sure.
But one component of this theory was that the regulatory changes that were made for election administration in the various states, whether it was changing the deadline for when mail-in ballots could be received, or it was modifying signature verification provisions, or various other COVID-related measures that were taken to enhance the ability of people to vote by mail that were done ad hoc at the time, but can still be seen as defensible or justifiable given your point of view. That they're saying also is a component of why the veracity of the election results is called into question. Hence, why the president of the Senate, under this theory of the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, is endowed with the ability to make a discretionary judgment as to which slate of electors actually constitutes the legitimate electoral votes for a given state.
Wow, so he's saying a lot of fucking words right now, and they don't mean anything. This guy would be a master filibuster. You know what I mean? I mean, just round and round and round he goes, but does he make a single point? Not really. Not really. He's just saying a bunch of shit. He's going in circles. He's talking about how, one legal expert actually did tell Donald Trump that he could steal the election. It's great. That's not an excuse, right? I could find a tax expert that'll tell me that I don't actually have to pay my taxes, right? Every fucking 15 or 20 years, those geniuses get an upstart and go, bro, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you have to pay taxes. It's actually tyranny, bro. It's tyranny. And if you want to fight against tyranny, me and my boys, we're also going to fight against tyranny. You know what I mean? And we're going to make the case in front of the court system. You know what I mean? And then if I go along, I can't be like, that guy told me I got legal advice. No, you can't.
Right.
You talk to an idiot. And that guy's going to get disbarred too, but it doesn't mean that you didn't commit a crime.
Yeah, it's kind of like the climate change deniers. They're like, well, yeah, 99% of scientists say the climate change is real, but I found this one guy who says otherwise. It's yeah, that's not really proving anything. You found
this
guy's
guy's worked for Shell for 25 years, but he wants you to know that there's no such thing as global warming. I see.
But yeah, Michael Tracey is totally doing the word salad right now. What's that thing Kyle loves to do when people say a lot but actually say nothing? And he goes, that's what Michael Tracey's doing. Yep, that is literally what Michael Tracey is doing for this whole discussion. Do you want to watch some more, or do you think we got the point?
I mean, it's up to you, man. I mean, there's nothing else that I can say. It's just going to be him going around in circles. Thank God that Kyle and Krystal have a little more patience than I do. They were willing to, hash it out with the guy. I think that they do a good job. I think that they basically filleted him in the first 10 minutes that this discussion was going on. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. The one thing that's weird for me about Michael Tracey is that I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that he actually does believe what he's saying, but you would have to be so dumb. And he doesn't strike me as that dumb. He actually strikes me as a kind of smart guy, probably not as smart as he thinks he is, because he also seems like he's kind of over-evaluated his intellect a little bit. He's in over his head with this Trump argument, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, so I'm torn here. Either you're dumber than absolute dog shit, or you're lying, and I can't quite decide which one it is.